My name is Margaret Ellen Calloway. I am 65 years old. I live alone in a small house in Pasadena, California, the same house where I raised my 3 children, buried my husband, and grew my roses every spring without fail. People in my neighborhood call me Miss Maggie. I bake lemon pound cake for the church on Sundays. I walk my little dog Biscuit every morning at 7. I read mystery novels before bed, and I never, not once in 65 years, believed that real danger could find its way to my front door. Until the day of my routine checkup. Until the day I heard something I was never supposed to hear. And after that day, nothing in my life was ever the same again. It was a Tuesday morning in October. The kind of morning where the sky is perfectly blue and the air smells like dried leaves and someone's fireplace burning somewhere down the street. I remember thinking how beautiful it was as I drove myself to the Westside Medical Center on Colorado Boulevard. My appointment was with Dr. Raymond Holt. He had been my doctor for 11 years. A tall, clean-cut man in his late 50s with silver hair and small round glasses. Always professional, always calm. Always the kind of doctor who looked you in the eye and made you feel like everything was going to be just fine. I had no reason to suspect anything. I was just there for my annual checkup, blood pressure, cholesterol, the usual things a 65-year-old woman worries about on a Tuesday morning in October. I checked in at the front desk. A young receptionist with pink nails handed me a clipboard of forms. I filled them out slowly. My handwriting has never been fast, and then I sat down in the waiting room with the other patients. There was a fish tank on the wall, blue and green fish swimming in slow circles. A television in the corner playing the morning news on mute. A little boy across from me eating a granola bar and swinging his legs back and forth. I waited 35 minutes before the nurse called my name. She led me down a long hallway, past several examination rooms with closed doors. She weighed me, checked my blood pressure, asked me the standard questions, and then told me the doctor would be with me shortly. She left. I sat on the examination table, the one with the crinkly paper that makes noise every time you move, and I waited. The room was quiet, too quiet actually, and that is when I heard it. The examination room next to mine was separated by a thin wall. I could hear voices through it. Not clearly at first, just murmurs like the sound of a conversation happening underwater. But then something shifted. Maybe they moved closer to the wall. Maybe someone raised their voice slightly, I don't know. But suddenly I could hear every word. The first voice was Dr. Holt's. I recognized it immediately. Calm, measured, professional. The results came back this morning, he said. A second voice, a man I did not recognize, deeper, rougher. The kind of voice that belonged to someone who was used to giving orders. And the second man said, "She doesn't have long," Dr. Holt said. 3 months, maybe 4. A pause. "Does she know?" the second man asked. "No," Dr. Holt said. "And she won't, that's the arrangement." My heart stopped. I sat completely still on that crinkly paper table and I did not breathe. "The family has been notified?" the second man asked. "Only the son," Dr. Holt said. "As discussed." "Good, and the estate documents?" "Already in motion. Once the paperwork is signed, which she will sign because she trusts me completely, everything transfers to the son within 90 days of her passing." Another pause, longer this time. "She has no idea the diagnosis is real," the second man said. "She thinks it's nothing," Dr. Holt said. "I've been managing her results for 8 months. She believes she's perfectly healthy." The second man laughed. It was not a warm laugh. "Perfect," he said. "Keep it that way." I heard footsteps, movement, the sound of a door opening and closing, and then silence. I sat there for a long moment. My hands were trembling. My mind was racing. Who was that woman? What estate? What documents? What son? And what kind of doctor hides a terminal diagnosis from his own patient? I pressed my hand to my chest and forced myself to breathe. Because whatever I had just heard, it was not an accident, it was a crime. Dr. Holt came into my examination room 12 minutes later. He was his usual self. Calm, professional, warm handshake, small talk about the weather. I smiled. I answered his questions. I let him check my blood pressure and listen to my heart and look in my ears. Inside, I was falling apart. He told me my results looked good. Cholesterol slightly elevated, watch the red meat. Miss Maggie, blood pressure excellent for my age. Come back in 6 months, I thanked him. I walked out of the examination room and down the long hallway toward the exit. That is when I saw her. She was sitting in the waiting room, an older woman, I would guess 70, maybe 72. Silver white hair pinned up neatly, a pale blue cardigan, pearl earrings. She was reading a magazine but not really reading it. Her eyes were moving, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. She looked like someone's grandmother. She looked like me. I stopped walking. Something deep inside me, something instinctive, something I cannot fully explain, told me that this was the woman they had been talking about. I did not know her name. I did not know her story. I did not know anything about her estate or her son or the documents that Dr. Holt had mentioned. But I knew what I had heard, and I knew with absolute certainty that this woman was being robbed of her own life without even knowing it. I took a breath, and I sat down next to her. Her name was Dorothy Ashworth. She told me within the first 2 minutes of our conversation, the way older women often do, freely, openly, without suspicion. We talked the way strangers talk in waiting rooms when they have nothing else to do and nowhere else to be. She was from San Marino, widowed 6 years ago. Her husband had been a successful architect, designed several buildings downtown, she told me with quiet pride. She had 3 children, 2 daughters in Seattle, 1 son here in Los Angeles. My son is the one who found Dr. Holt for me, she said, smoothing the magazine on her lap. After my husband passed, I was a wreck. Physically, I mean, stress does terrible things to your body. Theodore, that's my son, he insisted I see someone good. He set everything up. Theodore, I repeated. He's very protective of me, she said, and she smiled. The kind of smile a mother makes when she talks about a child she loves without reservation. Sometimes too much so. But that's Theodore. He worries. She paused. Actually, he's picking me up today. He doesn't like me driving to appointments alone. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman, this kind, silver-haired, pearl-earring-wearing woman, had no idea that her own son and her own doctor had decided the timeline of her death. Had no idea that there were estate documents already in motion. Had no idea that the man who was supposed to be protecting her health had been hiding her diagnosis for 8 months. I felt sick. Dorothy, I said carefully, can I ask you something personal? She looked at me with curious, open eyes. Of course, dear. Have your recent test results been concerning at all? Has Dr. Holt mentioned anything unusual? She shook her head immediately. Oh no, he says I'm doing wonderfully for my age. A little arthritis, some minor blood pressure business, but nothing serious. She chuckled softly. I told my son that, and he still insists on driving me everywhere. Nothing serious. That's what they wanted her to believe. I was walking to my car when I saw him. He was standing near the entrance of the medical building, a man in his mid-40s, dark suit, expensive watch, phone pressed to his ear. Handsome in a sharp, calculated sort of way. The kind of man who looked like he made decisions quickly and never second-guessed them. He was pacing, and as I walked past him, close enough to hear, I caught a fragment of his conversation. Tell Holt to move the timeline up. The market is shifting, and I need those assets liquid before the end of the year. He paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. I don't care what it takes. She's not going to be around to ask questions. Make it happen. He hung up. He smoothed his jacket. He walked inside to pick up his mother. I stood next to my car and I could not move for a full minute. This was Theodore Ashworth, Dorothy's son, the man she called protective, the man who drove her to appointments because he worried. He was not worried about her health. He was worried about the timeline. I got into my car. My hands would not stop shaking. I drove home. I made a cup of tea I didn't drink. I sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours with Biscuit in my lap, and I thought about everything I had heard and everything I had seen. I am a 65-year-old retired schoolteacher from Pasadena, California. I am not a detective. I am not a lawyer. I am not the kind of woman who gets involved in things that are not her business. But here is what I know about right and wrong, and I know it the way you know the smell of rain before it falls, the way you know the sound of your own children crying from 2 rooms away. What was happening to Dorothy Ashworth was wrong. Her own son was working with her doctor to keep her dying in ignorance so he could get her money before she had the chance to decide anything for herself. She didn't know she was sick. She didn't know her time was limited. She couldn't fight for treatment she didn't know she needed. She couldn't say goodbye to her daughters in Seattle. She couldn't put her own affairs in order the way she deserved. She was being stolen from, and I was the only person who knew. I picked up my phone. I called the California Medical Board. The woman at the medical board listened carefully. She took my name, my contact information, the date of my appointment, Dr. Holt's name, everything I had heard through the wall. She told me that all complaints were investigated thoroughly and that I would be contacted within 2 to 4 weeks. 2 to 4 weeks. Dorothy had 3 months. I did not sleep that night. The next morning I called again. I asked to speak to a supervisor. I explained the urgency, a woman's life, a terminal diagnosis being withheld, estate documents already in motion. The supervisor was more attentive. She told me that given the nature of the complaint, it would be escalated. I also called the Los Angeles County District Attorney's office. I stumbled through phone menus and was transferred 4 times before I reached a real human being, a young man named Marcus who worked in the Elder Financial Abuse Unit. Elder Financial Abuse, that's what this was. There was a name for it. There were people whose entire job was to investigate it. Marcus listened to everything I said. He asked me to come in and give a formal statement. I did the very next day. I sat in a small office downtown and I told him everything, every word I had heard through that wall. Theodore on the phone in the parking lot. Dorothy's face, so calm and trusting, talking about how protective her son was. Marcus recorded everything. He told me they would look into it. He also told me to be careful. People who do this kind of thing, he said quietly, they don't like witnesses. I drove home thinking about that. 3 days after my visit to the DA's office, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Miss Calloway, a man's voice said, "Low, careful. I think we need to talk." My stomach dropped. "Who is this?" I said. "Someone who knows you were at Westside Medical Center on Tuesday," he said. "Someone who knows what you think you heard." I said nothing. "You're a smart woman," he continued. "Smart enough to know that getting involved in things that don't concern you can be very dangerous." "Is that a threat?" I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. "It's advice," he said, "from someone who wants to help you avoid a very uncomfortable situation." "I've already spoken to the authorities," I said. A pause. "I know," he said. "That was a mistake." He hung up. I sat down on my kitchen floor. Biscuit came and pressed his warm little body against my leg. I called Marcus at the DA's office immediately. He told me to document everything. He told me not to go anywhere alone for the next few days. He told me they were already moving faster than they had originally planned. "How much faster?" I asked. "We're getting a warrant," he said. It took 11 days, 11 of the longest days of my life. But on a Thursday morning, 18 days after my routine checkup, the California Medical Board suspended Dr. Raymond Holt's medical license pending a full investigation. The Los Angeles County DA's office arrested Theodore Ashworth on charges of elder financial abuse, conspiracy, and fraud. A forensic accountant was brought in to examine the estate documents that, investigators later confirmed, had been altered to redirect nearly $4 million in assets away from Dorothy's daughters and into accounts controlled by Theodore. Dr. Holt cooperated with investigators almost immediately. He had been in financial trouble for years, bad investments, a failed second practice, debts he had hidden from everyone around him. Theodore had approached him 18 months earlier with a proposal: manage Dorothy's medical results, keep her calm, keep her uninformed. In exchange, money, a significant amount. He had told himself it was temporary, that Dorothy was old anyway, and the time he was buying her wouldn't have changed much. He told investigators all of this with his eyes on the floor. Dorothy was referred to an oncology specialist at UCLA Medical Center within days of the investigation going public. The diagnosis was real. She did have cancer, but it had been caught, despite everything, at a stage where treatment was genuinely possible. The specialist told her that with the right protocol, she had a strong chance. She was not out of time, not yet. I did not expect to ever see Dorothy Ashworth again. But 6 weeks after that Tuesday morning in October, my doorbell rang. I opened the door. She was standing on my porch in a pale yellow coat with her silver hair loose around her shoulders. She looked different from the waiting room, older somehow, and also stronger, like someone who has been through something terrible and come out on the other side with their eyes wide open. She was holding a lemon pound cake. "I heard you like to bake," she said, "but I wanted to be the one to bring something this time." I let her in. We sat at my kitchen table and we talked for 3 hours. She told me about the moment the investigators came to her door, how she had stood in her hallway in her bathrobe holding a cup of coffee and watched her world rearrange itself in real time. Her son, her doctor, the documents, the years of careful misdirection. "I keep thinking," she said, "about all the mornings I called Theodore to tell him about my appointments, how relieved he sounded when I said everything was fine." She looked down at her hands. He was relieved because the plan was working. She was quiet for a moment. "I would have died not knowing," she said softly. "I would have signed whatever he put in front of me. I would have gone to sleep one night and not woken up and never known that I could have fought, that I had a chance." She looked up at me. "You gave me my chance, Margaret." I reached across the table and held her hand. Theodore Ashworth was convicted 18 months later. He received a 7-year sentence. Dr. Raymond Holt lost his medical license permanently. He pled guilty to a reduced charge and received 3 years probation and a lifetime ban from practicing medicine in the state of California. Dorothy underwent treatment at UCLA. It was hard. There were months that were very dark. But she fought, and she is still fighting. Her daughters flew down from Seattle the week after the arrest. They have not left her side since. Dorothy and I have breakfast together every other Sunday now. She brings something from the bakery on Lake Avenue. I make the coffee. We sit in my kitchen and talk about books and gardens and the strange, unpredictable ways that life brings people together. Biscuit has decided he loves her. I cannot say I blame him. I am still a 65-year-old retired schoolteacher from Pasadena, California. I still bake lemon pound cake for the church on Sundays. I still walk Biscuit every morning at 7. But I am not the same woman who drove to that appointment on a blue October Tuesday thinking about nothing more serious than her cholesterol. I know now that danger does not always announce itself. Sometimes it sits in a quiet room behind a thin wall. Sometimes it wears a white coat and a warm handshake. And sometimes the only thing standing between someone and the worst thing that could happen to them is one ordinary person who happened to hear something they were never supposed to hear and chose not to stay silent. Thank you for watching Shadow Files. If this story moved you, subscribe for more. New stories every week.